Where did your couch go, Larry? I don't understand what's going on here.
We've moved.
You moved outside? Are you getting fumigations happening inside?
We've had. There is probably likely termites.
So,
but it's a summer evening in Los Angeles. There's no reason.
Almost.
There's no reason we should be inside when we can sit in the backyard.
That's right. So you had some mail.
I did. I haven't picked it up yet. I have not checked today's mail.
Expecting mail from Honduras?
No. What do we have here?
I don't know. Should we open it up?
It's apparently unsafe, whatever it is. Unsafe at any speed.
I suppose it has a battery in there. See what's inside
This
of here.
came snail mail from Honduras. Let's see what we have.
Oh, that's interesting. Were you expecting a secret diary?
Oh my goodness. I was not. I have a feeling it's from the underground. Do you not know how to use scissors?
No. I've never used scissors before in my life. So it's just.
I'm surprised this got through. That the Krauts did not.
Secret diary. If found, publish.
Oh, look at that! Amazing.
Huh. Maybe we should try to figure out what it is.
Oh.
It's a computer.
It's a.
Okay, so should I just read it?
It's a tablet. Let's read from. Let's see what the secret diary says.
Okay. It says Leo and Lucifer. That's what it's called. It's interesting. February 10th. It started a great day. It really, really did. Yesterday I turned 14, and today I went off to school. I went off to school with Peter, Paul, and Mary. Some names. And we all sat on the bus together, and it was so fun. But then
Daddy
at lunch,
took the T-bird away. Oh, I thought it was part of a whole thematic song thing. Then at lunch,
look, it's a secret diary. We're trying to read this.
All right.
But then at lunch, a Jewish kid named Abraham came up to me and asked me to go help him with something. When we went around the corner, he pinned me against the wall, duct taped my mouth, and pulled out a hypodermic needle. He whispered, "Look here, you bastard! I'm going to shoot you up with smack."
Wow.
Wow.
I'm not sure we should keep this diary secret much longer.
I don't know. He jammed the needle in me and then knocked me out with a billy club. The last words I heard were, "I'm going to slam a bunch of other expensive narcotics into you instead of using them myself because I'm a generous drug addict that doesn't like to get high." Have you ever heard of that before?
No, I haven't never heard of such a thing.
Okay, all right, let's continue. I woke up in a communal house run by hippies, and on one side of me was a rotting corpse covered in flies. And on the other side was Abraham smoking a cigarette, naked next to me. He told me I'm a pretty good screw when I'm unconscious, and now I've caught the sex bug, and there's no turning back. Oh, please, God, I thought. I got down on my knees and spent 30 minutes praying an entire rosary with the Beatitudes, and I'm not even Catholic. What hath Satan wrought upon me?
Shocking.
Right as I was finishing it up, imitate what they contain and obtain what they promise through the same Christ our Lord, amen. Abraham leaned over and stabbed me, shooting heroin into my face. I swatted him and he owed one more bead. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Okay, done. I placed the rosary back on the cheap Our Lady of Guadalupe statue he had in the corner, and I got up and told him I had to go. I got up and hitched a ride with the needle sticking out of my cheek. The driver pointed at me and said, "Sweet. You don't need any money if that's got juice left." Can you believe this? I yanked it out of my face and tossed it at him. He said, "Yippee! Get in the back." I hopped in the back of his flatbed with the 7 feral chickens and 2 dogs. Was that one day?
I'm glad he was able to document all of this.
Yeah, he wrote this all out. Okay. There's more. February 14th. Woo! Happy Valentine's Day, mofos. I've turned into a sex-crazed maniac drug addict. Life is awesome. I do not value faith, God, or my flawless family, and I'm rebelling. The next part's weird. The vicissitudes of hedonic pregnation fuel an unbridled rapaciousness for the totality of my libidinous phantasmagorias. Being 14 is so fun. That sounds a little odd.
I didn't realize he was only 14.
Yeah. It's quite a vocabulary for a 14-year-old.
Surprising things in this secret diary.
February 15th. I'm home and I'm so bored. My head really, really, really hurts. I don't want to go to school tomorrow. It's boring, boring, boring. So stupid. I tried to give Abraham his needle back, but he overdosed on marijuana while doing gay prostitution to fund his addiction. Dumb Abraham. I think I'm going to run away to be a drug mule in Central America for the Sinaloa cartel after school gets out tomorrow. Life is so dull. This is amazing. February 23rd. This is the last entry. Last entry. Que tal, mi amigos? I made her to San Pedro Sula, Honduras. I got 500 lempiras in my pocket and I'm ready to live. I met a creepy old man that's super nice named Diablo Demonio, and he said I could sleep in his hall closet as long as I need. I keep meeting the nicest people. He runs an unlicensed surgery clinic out of his garage and tells me he's on the lam. I never thought I'd ever be an assistant to a real doctor. I tried jamming his face with a smack needle, but he said he wasn't into that. Lame, lame, lame. I heard they tossed Abraham on top of the other corpse in the hippie commune. I wonder how the statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe is doing. I wish I had that rosary. I can't find any Catholics in Central America. You know what this reminds me of?
There's a book.
I was just reading a book. This book, Go Ask Alice.
This actually is more believable than Go Ask Alice.
Well, it is. We just opened up the mail. It says secret diary on
randomly mailed the secret
published.
diary.
This is right there. And we just opened it up and started reading it from Leo, 14-year-old boy in Honduras. This is crazy.
Leo's diary.
Yeah. But I got another story, though.
Mm-hmm. Yes?
It's a story about West Hollywood.
Oh.
And so, this is already connected to the internet, so I was able to bring it up on this device. At 9 a.m. on October 4th, 1969, Diane Linkletter, 20 years old, daughter of a conservative celebrity and longtime friend of Ronald Reagan, Art Linkletter, jumped out of a window of her 6th-floor apartment at Shoreham Towers in West Hollywood.
Yes, not too far, walking distance from here.
Just up the street. And she died.
Yes.
She died. The day after Linkletter's death, Art Linkletter held a press conference where he stated that his daughter's death wasn't a suicide. She was not herself. She was murdered by the people who manufacture and distribute LSD. He thought that she was on an acid trip and jumped over the balcony to her death.
Any truth to that, that she was on an acid trip?
Despite autopsy findings that there were no drugs in her system at the time of her death, and testimony suggesting that she suffered depression, media interest in the tragedy fueled rumors that Diane Linkletter was so high in LSD that she thought she could fly, and so leapt to her death from the balcony of her West Hollywood high-rise.
That's what's funny about this, among other hilarious things, is he would rather that his daughter be known as a drug addict
than depressed. Isn't that crazy?
All the baggage of being a drug addict, where people say, well, where were the parents? Wasn't she brought up well enough not to take LSD? All of that he'd rather have than his daughter was depressed.
But isn't that kind of also true? Is that saying like the depression is kind of on him, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's probably on him too.
A jovial entertainer.
Yeah, but he was an unpleasant man.
So let's move on.
Yes.
Beatrice Sparks was born on January 15th, 1918 in Goldberg, Idaho. One of those places. Kind of next to each other.
What are the two letters?
A devout Mormon, she married and had 3 children. She claims after starting to work with troubled children in Los Angeles beginning in 1955, she eventually went to Brigham Young University to earn a Ph.D. Brigham Young disputes this claim and has claimed no records exist of her ever receiving a Ph.D. or being a student. Okay? The fake doctor claims she then toured the United States lecturing about the potential pitfalls of modern adolescence at various conferences and schools. I was unable to find any record of this either.
She was a complete charlatan.
At one of these conferences in Los Angeles, she was apparently approached by a counselor who asked her to speak to a young woman who was particularly troubled. Sparks struck up a friendship with the girl, and on one such visit, Alice secretly provided her with several diaries written during her descent into drug addiction. They turned into this book.
And she published it. So Sparks published it, not Alice.
No.
Claiming this is Alice's book.
Well, why would she ever publish a girl's diary?
Well, because everything else she's ever done. What's everything else that she didn't take her? Alice didn't. Sparks didn't take credit on here.
No, she did not.
She collected all the money on it. Yeah, but she's a complete fraud. Everything
Maybe
from her education to where she grew up to she was handed this diary.
Maybe we have to look at.
I would wonder if this diary is written anything like an actual child would have written, an adolescent would have written.
Well, we'll get into that. All right.
Let's discuss that.
Sparks felt so moved by the girls' emotional diaries that she decided to promote their contents as a warning to other teens. After editing the material into a final draft of which Sparks admits contains elements not present in Alice's original work, a mutual acquaintance of columnist Art Linkletter, there's her name.
Yeah, there we go again.
Recommended that she pass along her completed manuscript to Mr. Linkletter. He, in turn, sent it to his agent, who sold the manuscript to publisher Prentice Hall. Big time Prentice Hall. Prentice Hall has a cover story as to why they attributed the book to Anonymous, claiming that a supposed lawsuit from a family, which never came forth.
Yeah, because they didn't exist.
But the more likely reason is that they saw dollar signs and knew the authenticity of the work could not stand up to scrutiny.
I understand what Prentice Hall did, but they did publish a phony diary.
With the promotion of Art Linkletter, the book sold like hotcakes. But not to children, the intended audience. A May 7th, 1972 New York Times review of the book said that not many teenagers are reading it, but adults are.
Yeah.
It's the kind of book we wish our young would take to heart, and that may be enough to keep them away. It went on to sell 4 million copies in the next 8 years.
And teenagers weren't reading it because it's certainly any teenager would
500,000 copies a year.
Would recognize that it's not written by a teenager, that it's written by some right-wing anti-drug fraud. Not that you could be, not that they all go together, but she is a woman that claims she lived a life she didn't live, she claims she had a PhD she didn't have, claims she had college degrees she didn't have, and now claims she was handed a diary that she wasn't handed.
Well,
and made it all up.
She's not in the picture yet, remember? like at this point, it's still an anonymous journal, and nobody knows who Beatrice Sparks is, okay?
Wow.
And so it sells for 5 million copies, and then in about 1979 or so, she decides to do it again. So, she knows a good grips when she sees one. Yes. Sparks came out with her second work, Jay's Journal, where she finally reveals she was the editor of the 1971 manuscript.
Hard to believe, since it doesn't read like anyone read.
Was not a great move for Beatrice Sparks. The scrutiny hammer came down hard, as Prentice Hall predicted. In the school library journal. Not hard-hitting journalism here. This is it's supposed to be softball questions.
Yeah.
The house that Alice built turned out to be made out of straw. The article was actually the house that Alice built.
Yeah.
Aline Pace Nielsen landed an interview with her in 1979.
Beatrice.
One of the only ones that she permitted. She thought that maybe the school library journal would be kind of nice. Okay. Sparks presents herself as either a youth counselor or a social worker in the article, vacillating between the two, unable to distinguish them apart.
Yeah.
Nielsen found no evidence to validate Sparks' claim of either. No clinic that she had worked out of, no children she had counseled, no parent or person knowing of her as doing this claimed profession. She found nobody that said that they had seen Beatrice Sparks or that they knew anybody who worked with her. Very cool. Sparks herself was vague about specifics when describing her past experiences in the substance abuse treatment field, and was unable to name any specific clinics or programs, even when prompted to do so, regardless of whether she had a relationship to them or not. So she was unable to say any specific rehab places, or if you had worked in this, you probably would know the name of one or two.
But she didn't. She didn't even have to say the one she worked in. She couldn't even name one. Any of them. She couldn't name one that she didn't work in. Yeah.
She did not.
She did not know a rehab clinic.
It would be like saying,
I work in the supermarket. Which one? Well, then name another one. I can't name it.
I work on cars, but I can't name any brands.
Yeah. Right.
Yes. All right. Okay. All right. So let's go. In her defense of the accuracy of the work, Sparks says no family members have come forth to refute the books.
But
now,
because
we're not there.
There are no family members.
In the actual article,
Yeah.
again, in the school library journal, Miss Nilsson surmised that this was because there were no family members to these characters at all, as they were completely imagined by the author. And that's a quote.
Yes.
Nilsson later went on to say, one has to question whether the titillating portions of the book came from the diaries of a 15-year-old or from the 53-year-old editor speculating on what life as a runaway teenager must be like.
Yes.
And that's where we begin. This is all backstory.
I can tell you a little bit more that's not in this, that it was sold as an ABC TV movie. It was made into an ABC TV movie, a special movie of the week, and it was taken so seriously, and they kept trying to get children to watch it. This was in the 70s sometime. Go Ask Alice, 73 was it? Very special movie, very important movie. And even I was... for years later, it was still being made fun of. It was still being made fun of by people that weren't even old enough to see it the first time it was on. Mm-hmm. It was still being, you know what's funny? Go Ask Alice. It's a very important TV movie. ABC presents Go Ask Alice. Now they would say, watch with your family. And
now, we haven't stated anything about the contents of the book yet.
Yeah.
That's where we begin. Okay, here we go. In the book, soon-to-be 15-year-old Alice gets a new diary. She's happy and practicing discipline and restraint through anorexia. She only ends up starting to do drugs after she loses her discipline of eating. This strict discipline, offered by the mental disorder of anorexia, is portrayed as a binding force that keeps the character on the straight and narrow.
So anorexia is a good thing in the book.
This was before anorexia became a big problem in 1971, right? Anorexia was not a big deal at the time.
So the girl is overeating and then forcing herself to throw up.
Her caloric restraint was seen as one of the reasons that she was able to
avoid drugs.
Right, because of her restraints. Okay, but it becomes a little crazy.
This is from a so-called social worker.
As she oscillates between being on and off drugs, her weight and caloric discipline follows. So whenever she's off drugs, her weight goes down, and whenever she's on, her weight goes up. Because it is about self-restraint.
But in real life, I just want to point out, since you haven't,
it is opposite.
In real life, the drug addicts are not known for gaining weight. Yes, the exact opposite.
Nope. When people get off drugs, that's when they put on weight. If you've ever known somebody who's gotten off, they put on a lot of pounds because they end up being addicted to sugar.
Yes, instead. Right. It's the opposite. And that's, by the way, that's scientific. That's not just my opinion.
Yeah. I don't think she's got a real PhD. Yeah. So Alice moves to a new town and lets herself go. Essentially, she goes to a party where she is unknowingly dosed with LSD. So she doesn't know it.
Where are these
There's this
parties?
kind of game, and then they're like, "Oh, here, take this drink," and she doesn't even know it. Okay, so that happens. 4 days later, she meets a guy on the way to the library, and she does torpedoes, which is a street drug, which is a crack cocaine and pot mix. So it's in the same kind of pipe. You put the two drugs together. And
so she was dosed with LSD,
and within 4 days,
and within 4 days, any kind of drug she's
does a
addicted
torpedo,
to.
which is crack cocaine.
Immediately,
again,
she's addicted.
This is 1971, so crack cocaine was very rare. It's a very obscure drug.
I didn't hear of what crack cocaine
until the 80s.
Until at least the 80s.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. So she did. Well, not only that, but it's turned out the author doesn't know what a torpedo is. But we'll get into that in a bit. So so she meets a guy on the way to the library. That does this. So,
but she can't resist
and then,
drugs because she's once been dosed with LSD.
And the guy's like, "Hey, it's nice to meet you. I'm a drug addict. Would you like to do stuff with me?"
Sure.
Yeah, of course.
Sign me up.
The next day, she shoots up meth with him on her arm. 5 days later.
Meth, I don't think I heard of till 2015.
2 weeks later, she loses her virginity while on acid.
As people are
As people tend to do in the 50s. A couple months later, she claims to try pot. Now, dear...
Right. Isn't that the reverse of the lecture?
Yeah. Well, not only is it the reverse, but now, dear reader, you may have noticed that torpedoes are crack and pot combined. But somehow Alice did not. Or perhaps the author did not realize what a torpedo was when she mentioned
they didn't
it
have
in the book.
Google in the 70s. She didn't read her own work because she had her smoking pot. days before.
So only after doing crack, acid, meth, and benzos does she finally get access to marijuana. A few days later, she is shooting heroin and being brutally and sadistically raped. Okay? Alice mentions multiple times how marijuana and LSD are the most addictive drugs that she's ever had. However, medical science firmly disagrees.
Marijuana is the most addicting drug. So she did heroin and meth, but marijuana and coke. But marijuana is the most.
Marijuana and acid.
Meth is scientifically speaking the most addicting.
Oh, we're going to get to that.
Yes. Oh,
The Lancet, essentially one of the most prestigious medical journals in the world, in 2007, published an article on defendant's liability. It mirrors other work studying addictions. Out of all the narcotics mentioned in Go Ask Alice, LSD is the least addictive. Yeah. Followed by marijuana. Heroin, crack, and cocaine, and methamphetamines, drugs Alice has no problem staying away from after taking them a few times, are the most addictive. A very interesting. But that's not all the drug strangers in the text. Alice claims to only have sex on drugs, but never mentions isobutyl nitrate or amyl nitrate. The most popular and legal drug known as poppers for sex.
Yeah.
In a 1978 Time magazine article, I'm paraphrasing, around 1970, as a result of aggressive marketing, poppers quickly spread to avant-garde heterosexuals centering in San Francisco. Marketed under such trade names as Bullet, Crypt, and Locker Room, isobutyl nitrate was sold openly in some record stores, boutiques, and pornographic bookstores.
And if a little commentary, color commentary. When AIDS began, one of the things they were looking into was poppers because it was such a sex drug, even though it wasn't illegal. Yeah. Or is poppers causing AIDS?
Now, our character Alice lives in San Francisco and Berkeley during one of her runaways, where she does a lot of sex on drugs. She and her friend Chris, which is female, this one, works at record stores and boutiques in San Francisco, precisely where the very popular poppers was being sold at the time, explicitly for sex. Alice itemizes the drugs she used in her San Francisco journey, yet fails to mention the most popular sex drug at the time. This is probably because the 53-year-old author who was typing the fictional manuscript in Provo, Utah, hadn't heard of it yet.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Let's move on. After staying off drugs for a period of time, Alice's peers bully her and sneaks amphetamines into her food supply. This is exactly what drug addicts do. Clandestinely dope other people who do not want drugs with their limited supply for no ulterior motive other than to be vindictive.
That's right, because especially if you're a drug addict, money is scarce.
And you're going to give away all of your supply to
so why would you buy
them?
these very expensive, hard-to-get drugs and then put it in someone else's high C or whatever they were doing?
This is like in Halloween. They're like beware, you're going to get these lollipops that have pot in them. Like, those are $25 each. Like, give me a break. They're not going to give them to kids. Anyway, Alice wakes up in an unknown amount of time later in another city, in another state, where her only means of survival is prostitution. Eventually, she makes it home and stays off of drugs. Her family welcomes her back and showers her with love. Does this kind of sound like the prodigal son from the Bible? This is likely not a coincidence.
Yeah, because that's the only book that Beatrice Sparks had ever read.
The prodigal son narrative is about justifying a parent's conservatism. It's a story about a foolish youth going out and doing their rebellious things while their conservative parent does not change their beliefs at all and remain crusty and stodgy, ignoring new evidence or ways to engage with society. Eventually, the child comes back after realizing different viewpoints, and an open mind leads to ruin, thus vindicating the steadfast conservatism of the parent. It's not about the redemption of the child, but the redemption of the irrationality of the parents in having a fixed framework. In the biblical story, the wealth of the father is accredited as the bountiful resources that enable the possibility of the transgressions in the first place. In Go Ask Alice, this becomes the stability of her family and the prosperity of her father's profession. Alice is freed from the mental asylum only due to the power and authority of her conservative father. The prodigal son and Go Ask Alice lays conservative hegemony as the underpinning of society, as opposed to its stagnation and decline, which is what it really is.
Yeah.
The deviations from orthodoxy in this framework exist on top of it, not beside it. Things such as progressive politics are destructive, colorful feathers that fritter away but do not shake the conservative foundation. This has long been one of the ways conservatives rationalize their ideology. There's a saying that if you're not liberal at 20, you don't have a heart. And conservative at 40, you don't have a head. You may have heard that. It was popular in the 90s. The conservatives believe everyone is essentially exactly like they are, and it's only other person's personal imperfections that keep them from this realization. This is the model of how society functions, forwarded by the prodigal son narrative and by Go Ask Alice. Church and family are the perpetually welcoming fallback structures for the non-conservative ethos, which is viewed only as the insincere frivolities of ignorant youth. Perhaps that's why parents ended up reading the book more than children. The person who wrote it could only think like them. The deep insight of the book in displaying these core assumptions, the deep insight of the book is in the displaying of these core assumptions of the conservative ethos, in that you read it and it really sort of, this whole concept really lays itself bare, as in what she projects on this imaginary character. Okay. All these observations are, of course, only true if the book is indeed 100% work of Sparks.
Yeah, which it is.
So let's go down some evidence. All right. So the text covers 26 months, and somehow Alice is 15 and 24 of them.
Yeah, that's right.
She skips a birthday.
Yeah.
I kid you not.
Yeah, I believe you.
She goes from 15 to 16 over 2 years. Okay. Lots has been written about the extensive vocabulary of the journal entries of the supposedly 15-year-old hooky high on drugs. Are these words you'd expect to see in a teenage girl's diary, or perhaps maybe written by a middle-aged religious woman?
Yeah.
First phrase, piercing the firmament. The firmament is a hypothesized structure in the biblical model of the flat earth that holds the stars and moons. On the other side of the structure is the heavens. The fact that I just had to explain that makes you wonder if a 15-year-old would know it.
No, not only wouldn't a 15-year-old know it, but only a very religious adult would know it, because it's not even it's not sophisticated knowledge. It's not scientific.
It's very arcane, actually, isn't it?
It's not even a religious phrase. It's a reactionary religious phrase.
Anyway, other common terms found among the youth include terra firma, gregarious, impregnable, unpardonable, rectify, woebegone, conscientious, echelon, regal, interminable, lecherous, premonitions, and begetting.
Well, let me also add that it's hard to believe that Beatrice Sparks is smart enough to use those words. So I wonder if they were added at the Prentice Hall level of publishing, because the woman that actually wrote this isn't smart enough to know the definition of any of them either.
The target reading level is too high. Let's move on. Beatrice Sparks, where did I go? What the hell was this thing? Sorry, I just rotated the thing and I lost my place. Mrs. Sparks continued to claim this is a real diary until her death in 2012. I'm serious. Okay, about the text itself, characters, their relationships, and personalities and scenes are introduced to the reader in sequential narrative structure. When they're introduced, Alice immediately establishes the profession of the parents on day one, as if the normal, regular things teenagers do after initially meeting each other is to exchange their parents' resumes.
That's right.
Beatrice is a really religious woman, and her character secretly wishes her family was more religious and laments about the secular society, like all 15-year-old girls in 1970 did. There's this assumption that deep inside, everyone wants rigid traditional gender relationships centered on God and family, and women have a deep itching desire that they are scared to reveal about how they want to be subservient to a man, do homemaking and cooking, and never leave the house. So much for second-wave feminists. They are obviously all just mistaken fools. The author tries to make it look like a child wrote it by intentionally doing run-on sentences, needless elaborations, and repetition of words. However, things like all the tenses match. There are no must-place modifiers or ambiguities. Grammatically, the text is impeccable, and there are no plot holes that require the reader to piece things together. As you know, even with professional writers, they tend to do stuff like that.
Do that. Also, it's a diary, so it's written for herself. It wasn't written for publication, so there's things that Alice, if she had existed, would know that she wouldn't write down. She did it again. It would say things like that.
Right.
And Alice would know who she was talking about.
But
there's
like,
none of that in here.
Today I met, Janice. She is, a lanky woman of long blonde hair, and she has a slight quiver in her,
And her father is an insurance salesman.
She paints it all out for you.
But there's givens in life. I wore the shirt I liked instead of describing it fully for the diary, who is not a reader. That's not why you write a diary.
We're going to go into one more thing. And we're going to meet the halfway point, and then we'll go into all my notes of the book after that. Alice is perhaps an archetype for other characters, such as Iris, the runaway prostitute, and from a small town in the 1976 movie Taxi Driver. Or songs such as the 1986 disco anthem by Machine. There but for the grace of God go I. And I quote from the song. She turns out to be a natural freak, popping pills and smoking weed. And when she's sweet 16, she packs her things and leaves with a man she met in the street. Carmen starts to bawl, bang her heads against the wall. Too much love is worse than none at all.
And of course, the most famous song.
Which one?
There's a song called "Go Ask
but
Alice."
That was before.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was
Jefferson Airplane. Yeah,
was before, right?
That was before.
Right, but Iris is basically Alice. Anyway, before going in, we would describe the values of the book. So, what are the values sort of pushed forward by this? It's anti-drug, anti-hippie, and it ridicules politics as children just being foolish. It is homophobic. It is anti-city. It is pro-family, anti-liberal, pro-therapy, and has a hint of Satanism.
Doesn't sound like a 15-year-old wrote it to me.
So that is my notes, and we are going to get right into it.
So, I think you're saying an adult wrote this book. Well, of course, it's unreadable.
I'm not saying an adult wrote this book, because as I open this thing up, it says, "Go Ask Alice" is based on the actual diary of a 15-year-old drug user.
Oh,
right
well,
there.
She wouldn't lie.
It's right there.
She wouldn't lie. If you call that into question, then you'd call into question her college degrees and her PhD and her social service / youth counselor job.
Well, I mean, sure, names, dates, places, and certain events have been changed in accordance with the wishes of those concerned.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Assigned the editors.
The editor.
Oh, look! It looks like some bird poop fell on this thing. But okay, so here is some of the of her description of anorexia. Now tell me whether this sounds like a middle-aged woman or a 15-year-old stating this. I'm just going to. We went out and I ate 6 wonderful, delicious, mouth-watering, delectable, heavenly French fries. Does that sound like?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe
That's
a
like
middle-aged
the
woman
15.
would be talking.
Yeah.
15-year-old, perhaps. Okay.
Delectable.
That was really living in itself. Okay, so that was the first sort of clue that I had, that things might not be right. So, about the character introductions, here's what we see right here. There's a character called Beth Baum, which I think is the most sort of John Waters type name that I could ever think of. So, I met another girl walking home from school. She lives just 3 blocks away from us, and her name is Beth Baum. She's awfully, really nice. She's kind of shy, too, and prefers books and people just as I do. Her father is a doctor, and away from home most of the time, just like Dad, and her mother nags a lot, but I guess all mothers do. So she establishes everything about the family. And I was a kid once. I never asked any kid about their parents. Did you ever ask any kid about their parents? The first day that you meet them?
No, it wasn't that important. It wasn't that important.
Oh, I do hope I won't have to be a nagging mother, but I guess I'll have to be. Else, I don't see how anything will ever get accomplished.
Also, she's writing in her own diary not only her friend and what her friend's father does, but that her friend's father isn't home often. I don't think that would have been germane, to use a word that a 15-year-old wouldn't.
Well, she has some, she has some lesbian desires for her, but she never acts them out. So, after the acid trip, they spend about 2 pages doing a ridiculously inaccurate description of what an acid trip is. It's absolutely terrible. But she gives it on the next page. She says, "All the things I've heard about LSD were obviously written by uninformed, ignorant people like my parents, who obviously don't know what they're talking about."
Unlike Beatrice Sparks, who
after she describes it for 2 pages that are completely inaccurate on exactly what it is, she kind of says that she doesn't know what she's talking about. she just kind of, I don't know. I don't know whether she was laughing or crying as she wrote this. I don't know if it matters. Let's see. There's some unbelievable prose in here. So here's somewhere in my brain, I remembered reading that 1,000 years with a man is as a day with the Lord, and I have found the answer. I was even now in my new time length living the lives of 1,000 men in the space of hours.
That doesn't sound like or anything a 15-year-old would be interested in reading.
No, it doesn't. It sounds like it was written by a religious woman.
Yeah.
In her
one of the church elders.
I don't know. Yeah. Well, and then there's this part right here where she ends up slinging drugs for this guy that's not putting out. It's kind of bad, right? Because she was expecting that. But this is what happens. Chris and I walked into Richie and Ted's apartment to find the bastard stoned and making love to each other. No wonder Richie Bitchy wanted so little to do with me. Here I am peddling drugs for a low-class queer whose dad probably isn't sick at all. I wonder how many other dumb chicks he's got working for him. I'm so ashamed. I can't believe I've sold to 11 and 12-year-olds and even 9 and 10-year-olds. What a disgrace I am to myself and to everyone. I'm as bad as that son of a bitch Richie. So the worst thing in life is to be a homosexual.
So that's also it's
worse than selling drugs
to a 9-year-old. I'd like to know where a 9-year-old gets this money, but that's not.
Selling meth to 9-year-olds is not as bad as kissing a boy.
I was nice enough to sell drugs to a 9-year-old,
but then I find out.
But then it turns out
that he is actually living a homosexual lifestyle.
After all I've done for him.
Well, speaking of 9 and 10-year-olds, there's parts of this book that's really sort of screen pedophilia.
She's 15 to begin with.
No, that make Beatrice Sparks sort of come across as kind of a creepy woman.
Yeah.
So here's another passage. Our lobby is swarming with wealthy old fat man and their wealthy mink and stable and chinchilla old wives. The men snatch their wives up in their suites and come down and make passes at me. There are also endless numbers of traveling salesman type who wander through trying to handle more than the merchandise. It hasn't taken me many days to learn how to spot them as they pass the first doorman. So there's lots of little passages in here about this 15-year-old being grabbed by older men, almost in a part where she seems to be enjoying writing it. So, she talks more about how she had condemned Richie for being a freaking homo. And then she says, with the shit he was on every day, it's no wonder he was out of control. Because... Yeah,
if he hadn't done drugs, he wouldn't be gay.
He wouldn't have been a homosexual if he hadn't done drugs. So, here it is. There is, she talks a little bit about politics in here. She says, and the crazies are beginning to get to me. So here she is in San Francisco, in a big city. And of course, Beatrice Sparks moved from Los Angeles to Provo, Utah, because she hates cities. The crazies are beginning to get to me too. I wonder if we're really going to have a full-scale revolution in this country. And she goes on to talk about when they're discussing all seems pretty reasonable, exciting, destroying everything is starting again. A new country, a new love, sharing and peace. But when I'm alone, it seems like another insane drugged scene. Again, the foundation is conservatism, and the frivolities of youth are the little feathers on top of it. And more bullshit writing she has over here. Adolescents have a very rocky, insecure time. Who was writing this?
She calls herself an adolescent.
Grown-ups treat them like children and yet expect them to act like adults. They give them orders like little animals, then expect them to react like mature and always rational, self-assured persons of legal stature. Again, 15-year-old. It is difficult, lost, vacillating time. Perhaps I have passed the worst part. Well, no. Still have about 100 more pages to go. Wasn't the worst part at all. Let's keep on going. I took a bunch of them out. I reviewed all the ones. Now, this page, a bird shit on it, and the bird had a good idea.
Yeah.
I looked up, and I applauded the bird.
Excellent work.
It was good work. So, in this passage, she was homeless, and she went to a church which is flawless and perfect.
Yes, as churches are.
And brings her in with loving arms and has no problem accepting her for who she is. This is a really great place. It really is. They let me have a shower and give me some clean old square clothes. And so...
Square.
Yeah. They want me to stay here a few days and let them contact my parents to work out something so that we can bridge our differences. But my parents aren't about to let me use acid and pot. And I'm not about to give that up.
Oh, no, because that's addicting.
Because those are the most addictive drugs. Not meth, not heroin, not crack cocaine, but acid and pot. Okay. And it keeps going crazier and crazier. I don't know what or when or where or who it is. I only know that I am now a priestess of Satan trying to maintain. After a freak out...
No.
More Satanism. Okay, so there's more about saving grace of religion and family. Mom answered the phone in the family room, and Dad ran upstairs to get the extension, and the three of us almost drowned out the connection. I can't understand how they can possibly still love me and still want me, but they do. They were glad to hear from me and know that I'm all right, and there was no recriminations or scolding or lectures or anything, because family is always perfect. There's nothing. There are no dysfunctional families.
Especially right-wing lunatics like Beatrice Sparks, who probably beat her children. I would imagine she beat her children.
Probably.
Yeah.
I'm guessing so. So, this one, she's just talking about herself. This is Alice talking about how she wants to live in the future. I think I'll go into child guidance when I get out of school. Or maybe I should become a psychologist. I mean, she never did, but at least I'll be able to understand where kids are at.
Kids.
Right, exactly. And maybe that would help compensate for what I've done to my family and myself. Perhaps it was even right for me to go through all the suffering so I'd be more understanding of the tolerant of the rest of humanity.
Huh.
Oh, dear trusting diary. That's exactly what I do. I'll spend the rest of my life helping people who are just like me. So, I was talking about the prodigal son.
Yeah. And now?
Page 121. It says, Gran and Gramps will be here for another reunion with the prodigal daughter. She kind of just sort of...
Tipped her hand a little.
Tipped her hand and said, this is what I'm doing. Slays her right out. This is the funniest thing. Everyone knows that sex and shit go together. And she has a little note down here. She means drugs. She doesn't actually mean fecal matter.
Oh, okay, because I didn't know. Sex and drugs go together, of course. That's how
as far as
children
I'm
are
concerned,
born.
a bunch of those lepers. Yeah, it's like... I thought it was really funny that she says, oh, by the way, that's what this word means. And she puts it in there as if, like, that makes it more believable.
But again, now, who is she talking to? Because if she's writing her own diary, she knows what her own words mean.
So, she meets this straight and narrow guy named Joel. And she has to introduce him a little bit more. So she comes up with this bullshit backstory. Dear Daddy, I guess I should be mad at him, but I'm not. He went and looked up Joel's record and told me all about him. I really got a kick out of the idea of Dad sneaking around and getting files and information for me. Anyway, Joel is an accelerated student who's on blah, 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 blah. And so, like, he works 7-hour shift every day as school janitor, blah, blah. And it's like, it's like she had to piece together the biopic for this character. And so she came up with this lame, like, really sort of half-assed lame excuse of how she was able to get it in here so she could properly introduce the character.
So she pretended Dad did the research. How would you do this research in 1971? You just call up a school and you ask for students' records and they give them to you?
Really going on over this Joel character. And then she's like, in fact, I think I really love him. And then she does like Susie Homemaker shit, like, Mrs. Joel Reams. Mr. and Mrs. Joel Reams. Like the old school way of like, she can't even use her own fucking
That's right.
first
She
name.
doesn't have her own name.
Like this is a woman who like ran away from home a couple times. She had a bunch of drugs. She like lost her virginity when she was 15. Like she's a swinger, and she's like Mrs. Joel Reams. Like, yeah, right. Like,
by the way, if I remember correctly, 2 pages ago, was the school janitor.
Anyway, yeah, exactly. It's just, and here, she says, even if I were locked in a full of acid, speed, and every other upper in this world. Speed, I mean, acid is not an upper, lady.
Yeah.
It's a psychedelic. Like, you don't have any idea what you're talking about.
Well, dictionaries, encyclopedias didn't exist then.
Yeah. And here she's teased for not doing drugs. We already went over that. I should have removed that one. And here's the funny part about being conservative. Is she said something like, they said, they've given up on me, her tormentors, and now that she can really be free. So she has a newfound sense of freedom. But then a sentence before, she says that she's practicing piano every day because she wants Joel to be proud of my musical abilities. And so she's free to be subservient and want to please a man. And that's her sense of freedom.
She's freed up to do things
for
that will
a young
impress
girl in 1970.
Her husband.
Yep. So she goes over some really nonsensical stories, and they sound like nonsense. And again, Beatrice Sparks comments on how nonsensical they are. It sounds incredible that the first time I took drugs and the last time, which landed me in an insane asylum, were both given to me without my knowledge. Oh, nobody would believe anybody could be that dumb. I can hardly believe it myself, even when I know it's true. So she comments about how ridiculous the book is and how ridiculous her narrative is. Kind of fun. Okay, and she meets a 13-year-old girl named Babby, who is a baby prostitute. It sounds a little similar, but we can go on. It says she goes over her ridiculous story, and she says, this sounds so unbelievable that I tried to ask her questions, but she kept right on talking. And she was so sad and distant that I think she was really telling the truth. And so it's just an absurd story. Like, nobody can believe this thing. And she even mentioned that nobody can believe this thing.
Hard to believe.
Later, I found she reached her parents. But by the time they got to San Francisco, she had wandered off with some guy who set up her own lab to make LSD. They both got mixed up in some communal shit. And eventually she landed here, just like me. And so anything but a nuclear family is evil.
Yes, this commune stuff.
You can't even have a roommate.
Yeah.
All right.
Because they can't be trusted.
Yes. And so she's getting out of her insane asylum. And they say, I am so grateful for group therapy. Maybe now I'll get something out of this place. And she keeps complimenting what therapy is like and what psychology and what all of this stuff that Beatrice Sparks pretends that she is so great. Okay, now, we're near the end, and she talks about monogamy, chastity, and obedience being the most valuable things ever. There will absolutely be no more sex in my life until after I've taken a man, for better or for worse, until death do us part.
Obedience. I like the obedience part.
And then, even after I think we'll still be together. And there's one more note about therapy. And I'm going to read the last paragraph. I used to think I would get another diary after you were filled, or even then I would keep a diary or journal through my whole life. But now I don't really think I will. Diaries are great when you're young. In fact, you saved my sanity 100,000 million times. But I think when a person gets older, she should be able to discuss her problems and thoughts with other people, instead of just with another part of herself, as you have been. Don't you agree? I hope so. For you are my dearest friend, and I shall thank you always for sharing my tears and heartaches, and my struggles and strifes, and my joys and happiness. It's all been good in its own special way, I guess. See ya. That's the end of the book. Not quite. Next page. The subject of this book died 3 weeks after her decision not to keep another diary. What the fuck is that?
So she died after she had a happy ending?
After a happy ending. And you know why that is?
So that she can't, someone can't produce her.
Yeah, exactly. That's why.
But she can't turn 21 and say, those are my diaries.
That's exactly why. Her parents
if she did exist, she's been whacked, maybe.
Her parents came home from a movie and found her dead. And I like how, like, a girl at this point, like, the parents decided not to put her on suicide watch. They say, oh, you have to stay home. Don't worry about it, honey.
We'll be at the movies.
We'll be at the movies, no problem. They called the police in the hospital, but there was nothing anyone could do.
Because she didn't exist.
Was it an accidental
I'm
overdose?
afraid, sir, that your daughter is a figment of your imagination. Was it an accident?
A premeditated overdose? No one knows. And in some ways, that question isn't important. Later on, Beatrice Sparks changed this and said, oh, no, it wasn't related to drugs at all. Just something weird happened. She died. What must be of some concern is that she died and that she was one of the thousands of drug deaths that year.
This is just complete. It doesn't even. How did anyone buy into this? How did even adults buy into this, or like Jack Webb buy into this? How did
Art Linkletter buy into this? I don't know.
Well, Art Linkletter is living in his own denial.
So you see how Prentice Hall is just so dollar signs that people probably read this.
Well, I get dollar signs, so I get what Prentice Hall did, but I don't get why people believed her.
I think it's actually kind of fun because it's just such an absurd book. There's nothing believable about it. It's just I'm trying to remove all of my notes because I told somebody that
I track you down. No. Well, you wrote some in the book though.
No, I didn't.
Oh, they were all on
These are all on a piece of paper. I told somebody I'd give them this book after I was done, and so I don't want to ruin the book for them. I want it to be
the end.
I want it to be suspenseful, so that they know what's going on.
Let's go ask Alice.
By anonymous.
Yeah, sure.
By nobody knows.
All right. Well,
nice end of May. Memorial Day.
Yes, Memorial Day weekend. Big plans.
I will be a year older next episode, which means I'll be the same age I am now, according to this book. Big plans? No, I just need to go home and do some more work. But yeah, that was good. A full hour of content.
Let's leave. Wait, I'm already home.
Yeah.